Facebook and Instagram aren't good for my soul, man.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter that you're gonna completely give them up. You're like, I'm done with
Yeah. And you know what's funny about that is I even had I was over 1,100, 1,200 followers on Instagram, which isn't like a ton or anything, but I was working on it, I was building it, I was doing a lot of good stuff, and then one day I got on Facebook and Instagram, and I picked up journaling again, and I wrote down how I felt, and I was like, yeah, Facebook and Instagram's not good for my soul. At least on Twitter, I can restart because I don't have like any followers on Twitter. I can restart with who I'm following and just write good stuff and just like kind of restart everything. So,
right.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So that's kind of like my experience. But this is all about you, Jarie. Tell me about so you have a PR marketing firm, you have your podcast.
Right.
I'm super happy that we met. We met through Shaan Puri's writing course.
Yeah, it was a great class. I'm glad we met.
It was a good class. I mean, he crushed it on that class. He did a really good job. So tell me about you though. Take me back to the beginning. Is this the first company that you've owned? Your PR and marketing firm? Okay.
No. I've been at 6 startups through my 25 plus careers as an entrepreneur.
Oh, wow.
I tell people I'm just unemployable, so I have to start businesses.
Awesome.
It's not that I'm that big a dick, but
right.
I have a certain way I like to do things, and typically it's been, oh, okay, well, that means you should start your own company. So yeah, I mean, I started out in the semiconductor business. I live here in Silicon Valley. Did a lot of chip design and product engineering for chips, and been with a couple of startups ranging from parallel processors to USB to Bluetooth to DNA sequencing chips, like all this crazy stuff that's like super nerdy, techie stuff. Yeah. And then, like all good stories, I met a girl and fell into doing PR and marketing when she got sick with leukemia. And so she's been dead now 4.5 years. So leukemia took her, but before leukemia took her, I helped her with her PR marketing firm, which is what I still run today. And it was, originally professional athletes. She was a professional athlete publicist. And then when I got involved with her, we sort of moved into, more startups and nonprofits. And so now I do basically strategic communications for tech startups, which is a fancy way of saying I help people tell their story so that they don't screw up. And so they can scale and launch and, do what they do best. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been interesting to, go from engineering to PR and marketing because, let's be honest, it's not that hard. Although I do write for a living, so I can appreciate when we were taking Shaan's class, a lot of the stuff that he taught us is stuff I do know a little bit of, but it's always good to kind of level up your craft with an expert, with a master, and that sort of thing. So it was pretty cool to kind of see that all the stuff that I have been doing over the last 5 years, him teaching some of the same stuff, but also learning a lot of cool things and getting to meet people like you. Cause in my game and in my job, it's all about networking, which funnily enough, I don't like.
Well, networking. Well, since you brought that up, we'll just stay on that topic for a minute because networking is hard. And it's very, how do you put tedious? There's a lot of egos. You kind of gotta figure out who you're talking to really quick and kind of get an idea. Are they in this or is this just like a contact I have in my back pocket? You know what I mean? It's really hard because I think the ego thing is there's a lot of that going on. You know what I mean? Yeah, how do you fight? I mean, you mentioned you don't really like networking. I certainly understand that. Where are you coming from on networking? Like, how do you approach that?
I started a podcast.
Dude, that is the best way to network.
Well, this is the thing, right? So I'm what's called a highly functional introvert, right? Engineer by training. entrepreneur by nature, PR maven by total accident, like literal accident, right? So my job as a publicist, PR communicator is to talk to people, communicate. And I don't like doing like biz dev or all that sort of stuff. It's just a horrible thing for me. It feels yucky, there's a yuckiness to it, right?
Yeah.
And so I love to help people. Like if I could just help people and get paid for it, which I sort of do, but if I could just, like, hey, can I help you do something that's, Shaan and I have the same ethos when it comes to training people. He's like, I want to educate the world. If I could only do that, I would do it. And it's like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So him and I align on that really well. So as I was thinking about how I could practice communicating, practice networking, and practice getting to know awesome people, I'm like, well, heck, I wrote the book, The Entrepreneur Ethos, which is how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient world through educating and inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs, because I feel entrepreneurship is the only way that we can actually grow and thrive. And it should be open to everyone, no matter who you are. Fame, it doesn't matter who you are. You should be able to be an entrepreneur. That's what I think is critical to the world. But I'm like, God, I don't like this networking thing. It's just horrible, right? But I love talking to people and I love getting to know people. So I said, well, I'm sick of blogging. I want to do a podcast. I'm not exactly sure the podcast I should do. But what would be really cool is if I could like connect it to what I've done in the past. And that's when the Entrepreneur Ethos podcast was born, because it's based on the book. And so I've been doing it for over a year. I think I've got about 130 episodes. And about 6 months ago, I sort of realized, hey, you're practicing networking. You don't even know it.
Well, I mean, I found out when I started my podcast that, it's kind of like, so I'm in sales. So it's kind of funny that we kind of both came from this back. So I got my degree in accounting. So I love numbers. I love the back end of businesses and stuff like that. But I've always been good at like sales, because I got my accounting degree, but I paid for it going to school I paid for it selling. And then I never got out of sales. And so it's weird. But, one of the big things in sales is, people love talking about themselves. So if you can get someone talking about themselves, you get, the most interesting people are interested. Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, goes over mirroring.
Love that
right?
book. That's the best book I've ever read.
I only recommend 2, but like when people go, I'm decent at sales. And so new salespeople will go, what books do you read? And I only give them 2, Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt, and then Never Split the Difference. I'm like, if you just start there, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll have a great place to start.
What was that other one? Oh, I don't have you need to send me the link to that.
Yes, I will. But Fanatical Prospecting, Jeb Blunt is like he's a master. Anyway, but mirroring in that book, he just, somebody tells you something and you just kind of frame it back in a question. And he tells the story about that guy who went around his wife's, his wife took him to a wedding, and then everybody came up to his wife and was like, your husband's most interesting. And all he did was like mirror questions back to people. So I was like, I'll start a podcast because everybody wants to talk about themselves. I'll let them talk about themselves for 45 minutes to an hour. And then they'll think I'm cool and I'll have some contacts because you know what I mean? You know what I mean? And I don't really have to do a lot.
It's true. No, I mean,
it's a good one.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of times, especially, so the sales part, I'd love that topic as well, because a lot of entrepreneurs are really poor salespeople, especially tech entrepreneurs, because sales is actually a really hard thing. And what I always tell people is, once you've built your product, that's half the battle. The other half is selling it and communicating it, right? And where most products fail, most companies fail, is in the process of go-to-market, launch, sales, scale, right? Because you can pretty much get anyone to buy an MVP or like use your stuff pretty easily. Like, I'm not saying it's not hard, but there's like 1% of the world that's always going to try something, right? Maybe it's 2%, 5%, whatever. But the real trick, and I've learned this over time, and it's really hard for me to do sales. Like I struggle with this mightily because I feel so like weird inside asking someone for like, hey, can you buy my stuff? Right. And over time, I've reading, Chris Voss's book, which is just fantastic, like probably one of the best books I've ever read about, communicating and like talking to salespeople. And the thing that's been really striking for me is that in order for me as a human and as like an entrepreneur to get better, and like if I'm going to launch another company or whatever, I have to stop focusing on the technical stuff because I understand all that. I've been doing that for a long time. I have to focus on the sales, marketing, communications piece because the best story wins. It's not about the product, right? It's about how you talk about the product, right?
Yeah.
And it's taken me 25 years to learn that.
Yeah.
Like, beat me in the head, you knucklehead, you got it, and it's just been because it's one of those things that if you're a technical person, your mindset is build it and they will come.
Yeah.
Not true. No one cares about your stuff. No one really cares about your widget, what it does, why, your tech. No one cares about that. They care about the problem or the job to be done, to be solved. And customers are just people that are looking for problems to be solved.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, I'm just like, well, I'm just helping people solve problems. Oh, okay. Now how do I talk about that, right?
Right.
And boy, that just flipped a switch. And so through the podcast, talking to, entrepreneurs, going onto their podcasts and just really building up that, it's actually a muscle.
Yeah.
Excuse me, the sales muscle, to really kind of build the sales muscle. I've found more and more success, and I'm just shocked it took me 25 years. It takes me a while, I guess.
Well, and it's not your fault. Salespeople get a bad rap. I mean, so my first sales job was in cars. So I sold autos. And I was pretty successful, but it was like that's the one, right? If salespeople, if salespeople are already like above lawyers, or we're right there with lawyers, car salespeople are above, you know what I mean? Everybody. Yeah, you know what I mean?
The third rung in the ladder to purgatory. And
Exactly.
You're like below that, right?
Yeah, it's like lawyers, salespeople, car salespeople. Yeah. But anyway, I started out in car sales, and thankfully we had a good, like we were able to be number one, and I would always tell people you don't get to number one by ripping people off. So we really had to like learn how to break down walls and like help people enjoy the process and kind of innovate the process. But I would hire new salespeople. I got to a point where I had done sales for 2 years. I was then I was a team leader, and we would hire and train people. And one of the questions that I would always ask is like, to new car salespeople, they just signed all the paperwork, they were ready to sell. I'd be like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say car salesman? And they would just rip me apart. Everything sleazy, lie, or whatever. And I was like, well, that's the job that you just signed up for. and now we got to figure out how to get rid of that.
Ooh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so how do you do that? We did it through a lot of empathy. We did it through a lot of, and I never subscribed. Like, I'm a weird sales guy. Like I told people, like, you're not going to bat 100 if and if you run into a sales trainer who's like, if you follow my process, everyone will buy from you. Like, he's lying to you.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, it's the same thing with entrepreneurs, right?
Right.
All we see, right, is the survivor bias of the ones that made it. And everyone's like, overnight success, this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, I have no idea how many, if you just look at the numbers, right?
Yeah.
1 in 10 make it, roughly. 1 in 100 maybe is a unicorn. 1 in 1,000 is a unicorn being $1 billion company.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people swinging at a lot of balls trying to hit it over the fence, and they just don't do it.
Right.
And so that's why this can be such a difficult job, and you have to be in it for the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you a question. I wrote this down because you're talking about Entrepreneur Ethos, your book and your podcast. And I have some thoughts on this, but I'm curious about yours. what should be the goal of an entrepreneur? Like money aside, stuff like that. Like what do you think? Is there like a real, non-tangible goal that an entrepreneur should have to succeed in this game?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the subtitle of my book. It's how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient world through entrepreneurship. And I've actually modified it for the podcast a little bit. Now I say how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient world through educating and inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneur game is not a get-rich-quick scheme. In fact, you probably will never get rich if you look at the numbers. And I mean, you're a numbers guy. Yeah. Numbers don't lie, right?
Right.
For every, unicorn, there's 1,000 or 10,000 companies that are never going to go anywhere. So this is a career path where you have to have a lot of setbacks and quote unquote failure, right?
Yeah.
And failure for an entrepreneur is not like, oh, I failed, this company didn't go, which is like, oh, this is another learning opportunity for the next thing. I mean, when you look at all these overnight successes, most of them have been paved with the bodies of the old things that have gone, that have been the stepping stone to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to remember, because it's a lifestyle where, if you want to build an independent life that completes you on your own terms, then that's the entrepreneur. But there's frustration in that because there's a lot of variability in pay. You're like, where's my corner office? And they're like, right. Sweeping the back, cleaning the bathroom because you can't afford the maid. I mean, and that's true. Yeah. I've done that a bunch of times because you're so committed to the process. So for me, entrepreneurship is really, I think, a force for good in the world, because it's the only job you can pretty much do anywhere in the world. There's always some entrepreneurial spirit in every culture, everywhere. Yeah. Because people need goods and services, people take risks. So for me, we're like the people that innovate. I always say that we're the creatives of the business world. So yeah, the business people that run stable companies, they take marginal risk, but if you're going to open a grocery store in a neighborhood, chances are it's going to do okay. Like there's some innovation there, but it's not like I'm going to start my own. I'm going to invent an electric car. Or I'm going to build the internet, right?
Right.
So for us, and it's actually an honor to be an entrepreneur. Society gives us a high degree of responsibility and autonomy then they trust us. Honestly, they trust us to go off and innovate. They know we're going to fail. And they're like, that's okay. You're pushing the world forward through your actions, right? It's the only way I can think of that does that. I mean, there's government, there's nonprofits, and then there's, the commercial endeavors, and all play a part, but entrepreneurs are the ones taking the most risk. I mean, you say, well, venture capitalists and people with money, they don't take risks. They're risk adverse, actually. And what's interesting is that the venture capital model is all a numbers game.
Right.
It's literally a numbers game. Like they know most of us will fail. So what do? They place a bunch of bets and they just wait for one.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah.
So it's all for them a process of, okay, I've got $100 million. I've got to deploy it over the next 5 to 7 years. And then I got to get a return on that money in 10 years. I'm just going to place my bets and see what happens. And some, people are good. Some are good at it. Some are bad at it, but they generally are playing the odds. So the ones that have a process in place, the ones that kind of have this innovation engine, that's why I think it's one of the best ways to innovate and move societies forward, because entrepreneurs find a way. We just do. We have to.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, when you talk economically, like that's what moves economies forward, is like this trade for gain. Like I built something, give me money to build more. Like that's why scalability in business is like so important, being able to like keep going and keep building and creating more and more value, like in the economy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's a guy named John Jarie. He is the executive director of the Center for American Entrepreneurship out of DC. and they did a study on overall job growth and economic growth. They're like, oh,
yeah,
what drives job growth? What drives economic growth? Turns out that job growth and economic growth are driven by firms that have been around for less than 5 years, and they have net positive growth. Big companies have net negative job growth. Just let that sink in a little bit, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I started this podcast out just for small businesses. Like, I wanted to talk to people who influence small businesses, and I wanted to talk to people who own small businesses, because that's 95% of the jobs, period. Like, I know it sounds crazy. Like, what was the statistic I was reading the other day about Amazon? They employ, like, well, especially here in Salt Lake, they have a few warehouses and stuff, but Amazon employed like 1 in 225, right? But for the most part, like Amazon, Walmart, these big guys, they only account for like 2 or 3 out of every 2 or 300. The other people are small businesses. So you got 95% of the workers in the workforce being employed by small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah. And it's just fascinating because
you got to save them, man.
Well, you got to save them. You got to support them. You got to invest in them. You got to go shop local. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I use Amazon all the time. I mean, I told you before we got on the pod, I had a fire at my apartment. So basically got to reconstruct my life. That was last week. And bought some stuff from Amazon. It was just more inconvenient.
Sure.
But, I went down to my local hardware store today, and I've been buying stuff from them too. So it's just fascinating because a lot of times the focus is always on these massive companies, just, huge juggernauts of tech or whatever. And through my podcast as well, I want to focus on those entrepreneurs, their journey, and why it's so important to like give them the tools and support to go off and build the next thing. And don't get me wrong. I'm an entrepreneur. Yeah, I'd love $1 billion exit at one point, but that does not define me. What defines me is helping people learn more about entrepreneurship, right? Educate and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs, because I think it's a great thing to do. If you want an independent life that completes you, this is pretty much the only game, unless you're rich, but then that's boring. Why would you want to do that, right? That's how silly, like money, like that.
For sure.
Need enough to get my, I just need enough to support my expensive coffee habit. And then after that, cool. but you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And so this is just one of those things, which I'm so glad I'm on your show talking about this, and that you're focused on small business, the little guy, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Because not enough attention is being paid to those mom and pop shops, those sole proprietors, even the side hustle, even the local, plumber, contractor, cleaning service. I mean, all of those people are so critical to our economy, so critical to the fabric of our communities that, they need to be helped. And it's just, I love nothing more than, some young entrepreneur or even older entrepreneur. Hey man, I'm going to start this thing. I'm like, oh, I'm in, let's go. I believe, let's do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you hit a tune that I have always talked about that was actually one of the foundations of why I did this. Is that I was scrolling through LinkedIn. I had this guy on my podcast. His name's Mark Smith. And he was talking about, him and I were talking, and I got the idea from him, but it hit me so hard that I was like, that's it, dude. That's what we're doing. And he said that, and I later adopted, that we spend so much time focusing on like Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett and Elon Musk and these guys who like have lived great lives and they've sacrificed a lot and they're doing amazing things. I don't know them personally. I just know what I see, in the media, right? You see all these guys and people like look up to them, right? They're like, I want to be the next whatever, Tim Cook, Steve Jobs, all these guys. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm just not sure. I'm not fully convinced that you saying that means that you're convinced that you want to live that kind of lifestyle, right? When right next door is Jarie, who owns his own business, lives comfortably, you know what I mean? Does whatever he wants to do and has and finds fulfillment and peace in his life, right? Like he's living the life you want to live. You don't want to live. I don't know, dude. I don't know what kind of lives they live, but I would be surprised.
So I can tell you, I run a PR and marketing firm.
Yeah.
We originally started out, as I told you before, my wife, my late wife now, she died 4.5 years ago from leukemia. Her original business was a publicist for professional athletes. Like Marshawn Lynch, Yao Ming, Amari Sotomayor. Like now I actually still have 2 clients, Deion Jones and Dontari Poe. They still do publicity and help them with their nonprofits. Wow. So I know some of these people that are like literally have come into a lot of money, right? And, athletes, typical athlete, is going to come from nothing and now have something, right? And
exactly.
It's such an interesting thing. And then they usually, almost all of them want to give back to their community and help the next generation, right? That's what Deion and Dontari want to do, which is just beautiful. And we actually teach young kids entrepreneurship through our thing called Founders Camp, which we haven't been able to do, but for the last couple of years, but due to COVID. But, that's why this is such a fascinating thing for me, because if you can educate and inspire that next generation of entrepreneur, no matter where they are, there's not a single person on the planet that couldn't be an entrepreneur. It's not that hard, honestly. I wish more people knew about how not hard it is. You got to work hard. Yeah, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to do this, like Elon Musk building rockets, right?
Right.
But one of the things that, when you get to know some of these guys, and they're all great people, right? Like we work with some really fantastic people, but they're extremely lonely. And the wealth and fame are a double-edged sword. Because they have no freedom. None at all. Like, you just can't walk down the street. Can't be anonymous. And so for me, when I look at that, I'm like, well, what do I want to do? I want enough money to be comfortable, take care of my family, do the things I want to do, but I want my freedom. So freedom to me is the most important thing. My time is the most valuable asset I have. And it's taken me, it took my wife, Jane, dying to realize how important every day was. Every single day that I can be free to do what I want to do is worth more money than anyone can pile on me. I just can't, I don't want to change time for money. I even in my own business, right? I'm a consultant, right? I have to charge for my time. I want to move away to build tools for small businesses and startups to help them tell better stories, because I want more freedom, because freedom's important, right? So if you want your freedom, then you have to set your life up so that no one, quote unquote, owns you, right? And, guys like Jeff Bezos, guys like Elon Musk, they're probably really lonely. I know Elon Musk is. He talks about it sometimes.
He talks about that. And I'm just saying from me, like when I talk to people, and even for me personally, like it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I just want to follow what I love. I want to do what I love. I want to find peace, and I want to just live the life I want to live. I don't really care about, I worked for a corporate group when I was in car sales. I worked for Honda. I've lived the corporate life. Don't really care about it. Don't really like it.
Don't like
the
bad corporate coffee.
I don't. It just doesn't and I didn't work for them for very long or whatever. But it's just, in my mind, it's more important to learn from the people that you can actually emulate, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever I see a thread that's 3 things Jeff Bezos does, I don't care. I don't want to be Jeff Bezos. I don't want to. That's a lot, dude. Yeah, I can't even imagine it, or Elon Musk did this, Warren Buffett. I don't
Well, the best story I've heard about this is, he's a comedian. His last name is Kevin Hart.
Yeah, I love Kevin Hart. He's hilarious.
Great guy, right? So Kevin Hart's hilarious. Kevin Hart's on, the drunk uncle of podcasting, Joe Rogan, right?
Oh yeah.
Which again, I look up to him because, gosh, he's at the top of his game, right?
Yeah.
So Kevin and Joe are talking about Chappelle, right? Dave Chappelle, right?
Oh yeah.
And, look at the guy who just like literally leaves it all, goes to Africa, and he's like, I'm done, I'm out, right?
Yeah.
And so Kevin Hart is talking about how he would love nothing more than to have the freedom to do that. And you're like, you're Kevin Hart, man. And he's
Why
like,
can't you?
I can't. I've got hundreds of people that depend on me for money. I can't say the wrong thing or I lose my livelihood, right? And
Yeah.
he's just sitting there reflecting on, I love being Kevin Hart, but I've got no freedom to be Dave Chappelle. Like, and of course, they're different people, but the freedom, Dave Chappelle, as an example, has the freedom. He can do whatever he wants now. And you look at that going, oh, wow.
That's that would be a great person to talk about. I think Dave Chappelle's like one of the best storytellers in the world.
He's great.
Hands down.
Great, you know?
I love his style of comedy.
But look at him, look at what he did, right?
Yeah.
The Chappelle Show, probably the best sketch comedy on the planet. I don't know, maybe.
Probably is up there. I mean, it was up there.
I mean, okay, you could debate whether or not, but like top 5, top 10. Let's just call it
absolutely.
Top of his game.
Yeah.
Top of his game. And he says, I'm out. I can't handle or I don't like what I'm turning into, which I think was the more important thing, right? And Kevin Hart's talking about this. He's Kevin Hart, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've made it.
Yeah.
And you can hear it in his voice. He's like, yeah, but I'm not free.
Yeah. Jeez.
That's the choice you make, right? So I always remember that. I always remember, like, do I want to be Dave Chappelle or Kevin Hart? And I love both of them. I love their comedy. I watch
right.
Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart.
That's a great way to put it, because I've always tried to find that, like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be Jeff Bezos. And if you end up as the next Jeff Bezos, just give me a shout out one time. You know what I'm saying? But like, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, like, we miss the mark sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes we solely focus so much on, like, I want to be something that you have no clue. When, like, right next door, there's a millionaire who runs his own business, who you never even knew. And by the way, I have this on my website. Like, Warren Buffett auctioned off his charity lunch.
Yeah.
I think the last auction was tens of millions of dollars.
It's for Glide Memorial Church here in San Francisco.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, like, so to score for anybody to just randomly score a lunch with Warren Buffett, it's going to take tens of millions of dollars. When the guy who lives right next door owns that chain restaurant, is a millionaire and sold majority of his stake, and now all he does is go check on a few of them every once in a while and cashes a check. You don't want that guy will go to lunch with you for free.
Or you just got to buy him coffee. Right?
Yeah, or just buy him lunch. Yeah.
Or you can interview him on your podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Which I did. That I gave that specific example because the guy in his name is Chemo Mack. He owns Mobetta's here in Utah, Idaho, Nevada. Like, he has like 20 of them or whatever. The coolest guy in the world. That guy will tell you whatever you want to hear. He'll sit down with you at one of his restaurants and talk your ear off for 2 hours. But you want to be like, you know what I mean? But you think Warren will have, you know what I'm saying? It's like, and none of these guys are bad, but that was my whole point, is like, I wanted to introduce people to people like you and Chemo and these guys who are like, this is who you should want to be like. This is the game. This is it,
Well, and what's interesting is it's not that you can't learn from them, right? Like,
I agree.
Warren Buffett's one of the people I look up to, not because I want to be Warren Buffett, but because I love his mental models. Him and Charlie Munger, the other half of Berkshire Hathaway.
Right.
No one talks about Charlie. Charlie's just like, just do my thing, right?
Yeah.
But
I agree.
What's brilliant about looking up to those folks and learning from them and seeing how you can apply some of those rules, right?
Yeah.
I love Warren Buffett's simplicity, mental models, first principles of investing. Ray Dalio is the same way.
Yeah.
Let's just look at first principles. Let's not get all complicated. I also think that you're totally right, that there's all of these local entrepreneurs, folks that are making it happen. Mm-hmm. You have access to, would be more than happy, honestly, to talk to you because they want, of course, a lot of them want to share what they know. Right. And, it's okay. But this is the other thing I realized, you're a numbers guy, like I'm a numbers guy. Okay. How many Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Warren Buffetts are there in the world?
Yeah.
There's 3.
There's only 3, man.
There's 3 out of 7 billion people.
Okay? Yeah. Who made it. Yeah.
Who made it that way.
Who
right?
made it. Yeah.
Like Bill Gates and Larry Ellison and maybe a couple. So half a dozen maybe. Okay. That's great. But how many in your local community, the business people or whatever, there's way more opportunity to be there.
Yeah, I've met some crazy people who are just hustlers. And like you said, I just wrote a tweet about Warren Buffett today. So I'm not like, I never want somebody to like I'm ragging on these people. Right. I just want people to change their mindset a little bit. Stop looking out there, and start looking right here. Mm-hmm. Start looking right next to you. Start with here, and you can build a beautiful life with the principles that your neighbors are doing. Just get to know your neighbors.
100%. I mean, I think the thing you did, one of the nonprofits that you talk about, the Exodus Project, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which, mm-hmm. Anti-human trafficking, like solid, like salt of the earth.
Incredible
people,
yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so what's beautiful about that is, okay, those are not like entrepreneurial, like they may be in one sense, but they're trying to, prevent and eliminate human trafficking. So reason why I bring that up is when Jane got sick, she got diagnosed December 26th, 2015, like the day after Christmas. And in San Francisco, 2016 was the Super Bowl. We held the 50th Super Bowl here in San Francisco Bay Area, right down in Santa Clara. The first ever PR publicist client I ever worked with in my entire history in PR marketing, the first client was the Anti-Trafficking Coalition, which was called No Traffic Ahead. And it was part of this one company we worked for, which was called the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, right? Uh-huh. And it was the first time I was in a meeting, right? The first meeting as a publicist. There's 150, 200, I don't know, 100 people. It felt like 1,000 people in this room, right? I am one of the only males and the only white male, cis white male, right?
Yeah.
And I am the publicist for this, right? I had no idea what I was doing, honestly, right? But this is the thing about, one, being an entrepreneur, and 2, about surrounding yourself with good people and learning from other things, right? So human trafficking is a huge issue, especially around big events, right? Super Bowl, you can imagine, sex trafficking, and even labor trafficking. And it's always the way it is. Human trafficking is a problem all over the world, but there's certain countries and certain people that get exploited, right? And I didn't know anything about this, but my job is to communicate this, right?
Yeah.
So I remember I'm sitting in this room. I felt like 1,000 people in the room. It's probably more like 100, right? And there's law enforcement. I mean, this entire Bay Area coalition is trying to, get the word out about trafficking, and like, this is how you look at it, right?
Yeah.
And you would think it's like, okay, well, what entrepreneurial thing can you learn from this? Like, what is it about this thing that stuck with me even to this day? And that's the reason why it resonated when you were talking with the Exodus people, because it's really passionate about it. Some people, like, very passionate about a certain cause and a singular focus on making this thing happen, and no distractions, right?
Right.
And when I heard that on your show, and then I thought back to the No Traffic Ahead campaign and the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, I just realized that when you surround yourself with like-minded people that want to, like, really change the world, there's nothing that can stop them. And that's what an entrepreneur has to be in their heart, right? The cause is bigger than you.
Yeah, always. That's it, right? Yeah.
If the cause is bigger than you, you can walk through any valley of the shadow of death, right? I shall, whatever biblical quote you want, because in the trafficking world, most of the people that are really doing well on this are from the religious groups. There was the Catholics and the Lutherans. I mean, they understand this is just a moral outrage. But
Yeah.
just,
Well, and you know, back to what you were saying, it's a huge problem everywhere. When I interviewed Candace on the podcast, she invited me to her gala, one of the only galas in-person galas in Salt Lake City in 2020. I mean, it was all COVID appropriate. You know, we had masks, we were social distancing, the whole stuff. But yeah, it was unbelievably sobering to learn about this stuff so close to home. And so, yeah, I mean, that's part of it is having this mission that's bigger than yourself, and we can all learn from these nonprofits as far as that goes, as far as like this goal, this vision that's bigger than you, right?
right.
Um, and just to kind of, you know, to keep going. So before, you know, I don't want to take like your whole day because you've been more than gracious with your time, but yeah, but you wrote a book. Where can people find the book?
It's on Amazon.
Okay,
Just
cool.
look up at Entrepreneur Ethos. You can also go to the entrepreneurethos.com. That's the podcast.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a unique name. Pretty easy to find me. And you know, now you and I are part of the, you know, Puri Power Writers on Twitter.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, it's working, dude. It's working, man.
No, he's, again, like, it's so
great,
interesting,
dude.
because
This is. Go ahead.
No. The reason I bring that up, you know, from a communications point of view, is that a lot of people always ask me, so Jarie, how do you go viral? Right? Like, what is it about going viral? Right? And it's one of those things. Tech startups say, how do I go viral? And then the next question is, how do I get into TechCrunch? Right? So it's like, why does this matter to everyone? Because it's an ego thing, right?
It is.
So
it is.
It's a huge ego thing, right? Because a lot of times in strategic communications, you find your audience, and your audience may not be what you think it is, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with, like, getting back to this anti-trafficking thing. It really was a campaign to have awareness. But what they also did, which I thought was just very entrepreneurial and really thinking outside the box, is that they would train UPS and FedEx drivers and airport staff to identify potential trafficking, right? Because those are the entry points and exit points, and those people are everywhere, right? So I know this seems weird. Like, how does this relate to going viral and getting into TechCrunch, right? Well, the thing that was very entrepreneurial about how we approached that particular thing is that we didn't just rely on one channel of communication, and you build up trust over time. So if you want to go viral, you have to have a track record of successes that are minor, like small, like tier 3, tier 2 type things, to build up to the big thing. Same with getting into TechCrunch as an example. And how this all relates is that as an entrepreneur, when you're building your business, the cadence of your communications has to be consistent, and you have to find a tribe, like we found each other through Shaan. You have to help each other build up to that big thing. And you have to also be very generous with your time and be of service. And that's the best thing that I got out of all of this work with nonprofits, especially the No Traffic Ahead. That just solidified in my mind that a dedicated group of people can make things happen. Now, clearly, you know, it's a long haul. That's the other thing to realize. This isn't a one and done. This isn't like overnight success, right? This is, I am in it to win it.
Yeah, day in, day out.
And the grind. Like, even, you know, what we're doing right now, be on the podcast, then you're going to release it, and I'm going to help you promote it, and we're going to, you know, do Twitter, you know, then we're going to, like, talk to other folks, and then I'm going to be like, hey man, maybe you should be on my pod. You know what I mean? Like, we have
exactly.
Because again, this isn't like one big thing. It's little things.
Right.
And that's how you go viral eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you know, it's important too, because in sales they teach you, you know, and I taught and was taught and teach or whatever, that the only thing you are really fighting against is obscurity. Like, it was like you were talking about earlier, right? Like, nobody cares what you have. Like, it's who can sell their story better. Right. One of my favorite drinks right now is Liquid Death, the water.
Oh, bro.
Yeah.
You're kidding me, right?
No, dude, I love those.
I have a hoodie. I have a hat. My friend
I'm going
Brian,
to get there.
My friend Brian is a fanatic. I love their branding and their comms.
But it's just their brand. It's just a brand. They told a story. And they're the best at it. Like
it's water in a can.
I'll be honest with you, and I don't really care who's listening right now. It's not the best water I've ever had.
No.
It's not like outstanding water. It's not like, oh my gosh, drink this water. You know what I mean? I bring it to my podcast when I do them in person because I'm like, dude, check out this freaking can. Yeah. Like people think I'm drinking beer or like, and it's Murder Your Thirst and the story on the back of the can. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Those guys broke out of obscurity. And when I was on Instagram, they put all of their bad reviews on there, and they just own it. They're like, this is our story though. They're like, what do you want me to do? This is, and I'm like, whoo-wee.
They crush it. They crush it. That's actually a great example of the best story wins. It's literally water.
Because I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's water in a can, but not only that, but like, it's not even the best water in a can. But I have it automatically shipped to my house every week.
Yeah.
I don't care. That thing's freaking great, dude. No, the box is cool. The story's cool.
And I love they have a death metal album.
Yeah, dude.
It's awesome.
It's this this contra this outsider thing, and they just absolutely crush it. Well, thank you, Jarie, for joining me. This was absolutely fun, dude. I really appreciate it. So tell us one more time your website, how people can find you, and then we'll sign off, brother.
Yeah, sure. So theentrepreneurethos.com, that is the podcast. I'm on Twitter at The Daily MBA. I also have a blog called thedailymba.com, so you can check that out.
All right.
Right on. LinkedIn, I'm there. I am still on the Insta a little bit, but I'm with you. I get a little bit bent about it.
It's not good for my soul. It's not. That's it. That's all I got for you, man. It's not good for my soul. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it, brother.
You're welcome. Take care, man.